quite on about that. That sort of broke. That story came out between when he was booked for the show and when he's on now. So we'll stick to his topic, but I do want to give our guest Chris Vance, if he wants to, a chance to comment on the breaking news that happened between when we got him for the show and when he's actually on. And Chris Vance here is senior advisor to our Republican legacy. He was a senior advisor with the Lincoln Project, the chairman of the Washington State Republican Party, and the 2016 GOP U.S. Senate candidate for the state of Washington. Chris Vance, happy on the show again. How are you today?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So I'll give you your chance here if you'd like to comment on the attack over the weekend.
Well, terrorism is horrific in any form, no matter who's being targeted. I mean, politics has got to be about a civil debate over ideas, and then we settle our differences at the ballot box. Violence can have no place in it. There's really nothing else that a responsible person can say. It's just horrible. It's wrong. It doesn't matter who the target is.
Absolutely couldn't agree with you more on that. So now we're pivoting to U.S. politics here. We're coming to the end of the Trump era, and now your our Republican legacy, best described as perhaps as a never Trump group. You want to take us back to some previous era of the Republican Party. Do you see an opportunity here? Because Trump, for all the good that I might think he's done, one thing that he hasn't done particularly is create enthusiasm for candidates that aren't him. I mean, we just saw that in the Virginia election recently, where even though he endorsed one of the candidates, a third of Trump voters just didn't bother showing up, and 17% of Kamala Harris voters didn't bother showing up either. So, just enthusiasm seems lagging. I mean, gee whiz, look at the New York elections, for crying out loud. 800,000 people just sat out compared to the 2024 elections. So, how are you going to come in here and create some enthusiasm? Because there seems to be a lot of people that you can pick from now, a lot of voters who are, well, what do we do without Trump?
Yeah, first of all, I'm thrilled to hear you say out loud the Trump era is coming to an end. That's not an opinion. That's just gravity, and that's just how the calendar works. And that's kind of our point, is our Republican legacy was founded in the spring of 2024 to advocate for the Republican Party to return to core Reaganite principles that have guided this party since World War II. And the Trump era has deviated from that. And the Republican Party and the conservative movement is about to enter into a major debate about our future. And we believe that we need to return to basic Republican principles: free trade, peace through strength, actually trying to bring the deficit down, being in favor of a free market economy. And we think that will bring back a lot of Republican voters that we have lost. Donald Trump has made the Republican Party stronger in some areas among some voters, but in other parts of the country, particularly among traditional suburban fiscal conservatives and social moderates, though, he's killed the party. And you can just see it that when he's not on the ballot, Republicans lose and lose badly. So we are mobilizing the traditional Republican base around the country for the battle of 2028.
So how do you kind of remove the stigma of previous Republicans and actually current ones? I mean, you mentioned cutting the government, for example. Well, Doge was bird dogging all sorts of places to cut, but then House and Senate Republicans are sitting on their thumbs. And good Lord, you talk about deficit spending. Look at the Bush administration. They started 2 wars while cutting taxes, which could only lead to deficit spending. So people have that stigma, and then you say, well, you want to take us back to Reaganite. I mean, no one's remembering Reagan. They're remembering Bush and current whatever the Republicans are doing.
Yeah, and that's one of the things is when you personalize politics like that, then you end up with that conundrum. We very rarely talk about Donald Trump. We talk about principles. If you go to our webpage, ourrepublicanlegacy.com, we talk about the principles that should guide this party. And yes, you're right. Some past Republicans have not adhered to those principles. But, they tried, at least they tried. When Ronald Reagan cut taxes, he did so because we were looking at government surpluses. The same thing with George W. Bush. I mean, and then they tried to bring the deficits down. And at least those Republicans supported free trade. They stood behind our NATO allies and our other allies. This administration has totally deviated from basic Republican principles. Past Republicans were not blameless, but we think we need to return back to those basic core principles that work. Conservatism works when it is actually implied to government.
I mean, in some aspects, though, the world is a little bit different than it was with Reagan. And like you mentioned, the NATO allies, for example. I mean, we have people getting arrested. I mean, we had a Jew being harassed by police in England because he was walking past a bunch of pro-Palestinian protesters with a yarmulke on. You know, the guys supporting October 7th are being protected while their victims are being harassed. And just all these people getting arrested for social media posts. That wasn't going on in England back in the day when Reagan was around. So, like, we've seen the world change around it. And I mean, it seems like we got to question who really is our ally these days when they're doing crazy crap like that. I mean, Germany, 60 Minutes did a profile on their police for arresting people for doing social media posts. It's like crazy. You have a SWAT team break down your door for a social media post, and this is our ally? So I'm like, how do you sell to the American people, these are our allies against whom? People who are just as bad at, I mean, I guess Putin assassinates people, but that's about the only upgrade there.
Putin doesn't just assassinate people, he invades his neighbors. He's invaded the Ukraine, he invaded Georgia, he's invaded Moldova. Russia is the threat to peace in Europe. And it is unfortunate that a lot of our allies have never adopted the First Amendment. That's a fact that most Americans don't really appreciate is Western Europeans have never had the kind of freedom, never, not just recently, never had the type of freedom Americans have. In Britain, they have something called the Official Secrets Act, where, I mean, the government is allowed to suppress free speech. That's always been the case. But let's not lose sight of who the enemy is. The enemy is a fascist dictatorship in Moscow that wants to reestablish the Russian Empire, that if they conquer Ukraine, the next target will be the Baltic states, maybe even Poland, because Vladimir Putin, I mean, just as Adolf Hitler did, he's telling the world what he's going to do. He intends to reconquer the Russian Empire, and democracies need to stand up against that. Republicans used to understand that, unquestionably.
Yeah, well, going back at least to the Cold War era, that is correct. Although it seems like now we're in more of 100 years ago, the isolationism where you got this war in Europe, you got what do we care about so-and-so going against so-and-so, because that just seems to be European history playing out right there. I mean, when has there not been a war in Europe except for the Cold War, which
when has there not been a war in Europe? When has there not been a war in Europe? The past 75 years, when America stood with its allies and deterred Russian aggression. No, you're right. Europe has been in chaos for a long time. The world is in chaos when America reverts to isolationism. We learned that lesson, hopefully, after World War II. And now it appears you're right, you used the word isolationism. Republicans are reverting to the isolationism of the 1920s, which were disasters. And we need to stand up for, basic core Republican principles around the world that were espoused by Ronald Reagan. Russia is no longer communist. They're still a dictatorship bent on attacking their neighbors.
And we're just about out of time for this segment, so I will want to give you this last word here. 40 seconds left. That's what the music means. Real quick, then. How do you sell to the public that's tired of endless wars, et cetera, the Democrat talking points from the last 20 years? How do you sell to them? We got to be present in the world stage.
Because it works. In America, when America is absent or America is weak, that's what leads to instability and empowers aggressors. I encourage people to go to ourrepublicanlegacy.com and join us to bring the Republican Party back to what it once was.
All right, listeners, that's something for you to check out as we're coming to a break, but we got more Al and Nathan show on the other side.